April, 1502nd year. In a castle on the Welsh border, a teenager is dying. Fever burns through his body, skin glistens with sweat that never dries. Beside him sits his young wife. She holds his hand, whispers in Spanish. Prays to every saint she knows. A week ago they laughed together at dinner. Today the physicians shrug helplessly. Prince Arthur Tudor, eldest son of the King of England, future ruler of the realm. In a few hours he will stop breathing. And when archaeologists uncover his remains 500 years later, they will find something strange. Something that will force textbooks to be rewritten. But first, something else. What did Arthur really die of? An unknown infection? A lingering poison? A curse? And what if he had lived longer? Imagine a world without Henry VIII on the throne, without the scaffold for 2 queens, without the church schism, without religious wars that claimed thousands of lives. One illness changed everything. One young man died instead of ruling, and in his place rose a brother who would enter history as one of Europe's most ruthless monarchs. Arthur's death triggered a chain reaction. It created an obsession with heirs, an obsession that devoured the Tudors one by one. Hit like if you want the full truth. It really helps. Share this video with friends. And now, back to where it all began. 30 years before Arthur's birth, England burned in the fires of civil war. 2 royal dynasties fought for power. The Lancasters wore the red rose on their coats of arms. The Yorks chose white. They slaughtered each other on battlefields, burned enemy estates, executed captives without trial. Kings changed like gloves. Today you're a lord at court. Tomorrow your head is on a pike by the city gates. No one felt safe. Even children knew the English throne was cursed. Then came the day that changed everything. August 1485. A small field in the heart of the country. On one side, King Richard III, seasoned warrior, ruthless ruler, the last of the Yorks. On the other, Henry Tudor, nobody special, son of a Welsh lord, a man raised in exile, his claim to the crown as thin as spider silk. But he returned with an army. The battle lasted hours. Richard spotted Henry in the crowd, decided to end it with one blow, gathered his personal guard, charged across the field straight at his enemy. He almost reached him, almost broke through Henry's men. But he was stopped. The royal crown fell into the mud. Richard died right there, and Henry lifted that crown. Thus, the Tudor dynasty was born. But the war did not end immediately. The country was exhausted, fractured, full of hatred. Half the nobility still backed the Yorks even after their defeat. Henry Tudor knew his power hung by a thread. He needed a way to unite both dynasties. He found it. Elizabeth of York, niece of the dead Richard, daughter of the previous king, Edward I, sister of the 2 princes who vanished in the Tower. Beautiful, young, and most important, the last direct York heir. Henry married her. A Lancastrian took a Yorkist princess as wife. The red rose joined the white. A new emblem was born. The Tudor rose, red and white, symbol of unity. But symbols don't feed people, don't stop plotters. Henry knew his dynasty needed more. It needed an heir, a son who would unite both royal lines in his blood. Elizabeth became pregnant almost immediately after the wedding. Henry ordered prayers in every church in the kingdom. They prayed for a son, for a healthy boy, for the dynasty's future. On the 19th of September 1486, the prayers were answered. Elizabeth gave birth to a son in Winchester Castle. He was named Arthur, after the legendary king of the Britons, after the hero who united Britain against invaders. The name carried a message. The new Arthur would unite the country again, end the wars forever, bring a golden age. People celebrated in the streets. Bells rang in every church in London. This was not just a birth. This was a promise. Hope for a peaceful future. Arthur grew up in luxury and pressure at the same time. He was 3 years old when his father knighted him. The medieval ceremony lasted all night. The boy was bathed in ritual water. He knelt until dawn, recited prayers he barely understood, then received a tiny sword, a miniature weapon for tiny hands. He was taken down the Thames on the royal barge. Crowds shouted from the banks. Everyone said the same thing: "This boy will save England." Titles came faster than he learned to read. Duke of Cornwall, Prince of Wales, Earl of Chester. Each title arrived with a ceremony, with oaths, with responsibility heavier than the boy himself. But in the royal nursery, there was another boy, Henry, born 4 years after Arthur in 1491, the younger brother, the spare, the one who didn't matter as long as Arthur lived. 2 brothers, 2 completely different lives. Arthur sat over books with the best teachers in Europe. Henry ran in the courtyard with a wooden sword. Arthur studied Latin and ancient Greek. Henry trained in tournaments. Arthur read philosophers and studied the history of European dynasties. Henry hunted in the forests and played ball with servants. Arthur was being prepared to rule a kingdom. Henry was prepared simply to exist on the sidelines. The brothers loved each other, played together when there was time, laughed at jokes, but everyone around knew the truth. Only one of them would wear the crown. Arthur excelled at everything. His tutors marveled at the boy's mind. He could debate in Latin on complex matters, understood political philosophy better than adult advisors, loved history, and recited the names of English kings by heart from the beginning of time. He was also athletic, tall for his age, graceful in movement, a superb dancer who enchanted halls. His hair had a reddish-golden tint like his grandfather Edward IV. His eyes were small but bright, his manners gentle. One observer recorded that Arthur was the most beloved and sincere prince he had ever seen. But being a prince meant more than being smart or kind. Arthur had to secure England's place in Europe. He needed to marry. In Spain ruled 2 powerful monarchs. Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile had united their kingdoms through marriage. Now they were conquering the last Muslim territories in Granada, building an empire that would stretch across the ocean. They had a daughter, Catherine, born in December 1485, just 3 months after Arthur. Henry VII saw an opportunity. An alliance with Spain would protect England from France, give the Tudor dynasty legitimacy in Europe's eyes, show that England mattered again. Negotiations began when Arthur was barely 2. The Spaniards were interested, but hesitated. Would this Tudor dynasty be stable? Would it fall like so many before it? For years, diplomats argued over details, the size of the dowry, the terms of the marriage contract, political guarantees. Finally, they reached agreement. Arthur and Catherine would marry. In August 1497, the official betrothal took place. Arthur was 10. 2 years later, they married by proxy. That meant other people stood in for them during the ceremony. The real wedding would come later, but Arthur and Catherine began exchanging letters. They wrote in Latin, never having seen each other, but they came to know each other through words on parchment. Arthur wrote that he rejoiced at the thought of their marriage, that he felt deep affection for his future bride. Catherine replied with the same warmth. 2 teenagers joined by politics, but something real was growing between them. October, 1500, and first year. Catherine of Aragon arrived in England. She was 16. She had traveled for months, across the sea and foreign lands, nervous, excited, afraid all at once. Arthur was now 15. Tall, handsome, educated. They met for the first time at the manor of Dogmersfield in Hampshire. Records say Arthur greeted her warmly, promised to be a loving and faithful husband. 2 weeks later, the wedding took place, the 14th of November, 1501st year, in St. Paul's Cathedral in London. The Archbishop of Canterbury conducted the ceremony. Nobles from across Europe came to watch. Celebrations lasted days. That night, the Bishop of London blessed their marriage bed. Then everyone left them alone. What happened in that room became one of history's most debated questions. Was Was the marriage consummated physically? Years later, this question would tear England apart. It would end a religious era, cause deaths and wars. But on that November night in 1501, no one knew it mattered. They were just two teenagers married for politics, trying to understand their shared future. For a month, Arthur and Catherine lived at the manor of Tickenhill in Worcestershire. Then, in December, they moved to Ludlow Castle. This fortress stood on the Welsh border. Strong walls, tall towers, beautiful chambers. Here, Arthur was to learn to govern Wales. Here, he was to prove himself worthy of the crown. Catherine joined him. Together, they created a court, hired servants, built daily rituals. Arthur attended council meetings, made decisions, studied the art of governance. Catherine supported him, learned English customs, wrote letters to her parents in Spain. For 3 months, everything seemed perfect, but something was wrong. From the wedding, Arthur looked weaker. Not dramatically, he just tired more easily than before. Catherine noticed. The servants did too. But no one worried much. Arthur was 15. He was growing. He worked hard. Of course, he was tired. Then came March, and with it came death. In the town of Ludlow, a problem appeared. Illness spread through the streets. Some called it the plague. Others blamed bad air or evil vapors. People fell sick. Some recovered. Many did not. The disease crept closer to the castle. On the 27th of March, 1502nd year, Arthur fainted. His body burned with fever. He trembled. Sweat poured from his skin. Catherine fell ill the same day. Both were confined to their chambers. Servants brought food and water. Royal physicians examined them, prescribed herbs and bloodletting. Nothing helped. The illness was called the sweating sickness. Those who caught it described a feeling as if their blood boiled inside their veins. Heat radiated from the body. Sweat soaked clothes in minutes. Many fell into delirium, did not know where they were, did not recognize their own families. The disease killed quickly. Some died within hours. Catherine's body fought. Slowly, painfully, she began to recover. Arthur did not. For days he suffered. The physicians tried everything they knew, let blood, gave purgatives, applied herbal remedies. Priests came to pray. Servants begged God for mercy. Catherine, barely recovering, stayed as close as she was allowed. She wanted to be with her husband, but the illness devoured him from within. One contemporary described it as a deadly contagion that completely overcame pure blood. No medicine could stop it. No prayer could cure it. On the 2nd of April, 1502nd year, dawn rose cold and gray over Ludlow Castle. Arthur Tudor died in his bed. He was 15 years old. He had been married less than 5 months. He had been Prince of Wales his entire life. He was born to be king. He would never be king. The news had to reach the king. Messengers rode fast to Greenwich Palace, where Henry VII and Elizabeth of York were staying. They arrived late on a Monday evening. The king was asleep. His servants woke the royal confessor. The priest, they told him first. Early Tuesday morning, the priest entered the royal chambers. He sent the other servants away, then quoted the Bible in Latin. "Shall we receive good from the hand of God and not receive evil?" Henry VII understood instantly. The priest told him, "Your most beloved son has gone to God." The king's grief was absolute. This was not just his son. This was the heir. His hope. The reason the Wars of the Roses ended. Arthur's death meant everything was fragile again. Henry sent for his wife. They would face this together. When Elizabeth of York came and saw her husband's face, she understood. But Elizabeth was strong. She spoke calmly, thoughtfully. "Remember your own life," she said. "Remember your kingdom needs you. Your mother had only one child, you. God preserved you. God brought you to this throne." She continued, "We still have Prince Henry, strong and healthy. We have 2 beautiful daughters. We are both still young enough to have more children." She meant these words. They gave Henry strength. She left his chambers, and then she broke. In her own rooms, away from the court, Elizabeth of York collapsed from grief. She was a mother who had just lost her firstborn. Her ladies-in-waiting panicked. They sent for the king. Henry VII ran to his wife. Now he had to comfort her. They held each other, wept together. At Ludlow Castle, there were things to do. Arthur's body could not simply remain in bed. Medieval customs required certain preparations. First, the physicians removed the internal organs. This was standard practice for royal bodies that needed transport and preservation. They filled the cavity with spices, expensive spices, cinnamon, cloves, frankincense. They were meant to mask the smell of decay and preserve the flesh. Then they wrapped him in cloth, placed him in a wooden chest. The chest was covered in black velvet. A white cross marked the top. He was carried to the castle hall, laid on a table draped in rich, golden cloth. Silver candlesticks surrounded him. Wax candles burned constantly. 4 large candelabra with massive candles stood at the corners. For 3 weeks the body remained there while preparations were made. Meanwhile, 10-year-old Prince Henry became heir to the throne. The spare became the most important person in England. If Henry died, the Tudor dynasty died with him. The pressure was unbearable. He felt every ounce of that weight. That burden, planted in childhood, would later shape the man he became. A king obsessed with heirs, terrified of failure, willing to destroy anyone in his path. On the 23rd of April, 1502nd year, on St. George's Day, instead of celebration, England mourned. Arthur's body was carried from the castle to St. Lawrence's Church. The procession was grand but somber. Yeomen in black and gold bore the coffin. Bishops walked beside, swinging censers. The Earl of Surrey led the mourners. No one from Arthur's family came. Royal custom forbade it. 2 Spanish nobles from Catherine's court walked behind, representing the grief of the young widow. 3 days of prayers and masses filled the air. Alms were given to the poor. Arthur's heart, or perhaps his organs, was buried in St. Lawrence's Church. But the rest of the body had one final journey to make, to Worcester Cathedral, where English princes were buried. The journey from Ludlow to Worcester was short, perhaps 30 miles, but it might as well have been 100. The body was placed on what records call a chariot, likely some kind of carriage or wagon. 6 horses pulled it. The horses were draped in black cloth. The chariot, too. Then the weather turned. Rain, wind, cold that pierced clothing. Roads became rivers of mud. The horses could not pull the weight. Oxen had to be brought to drag the carriage through the muck. The mourners walked through the storm, soaked and frozen, but they pressed on. One witness wrote, "It was the worst cold, windy, rainy day I ever saw. Even nature seemed to mourn." Meanwhile at court, Henry VII was shattered. He locked himself in his rooms, refused to see anyone. Elizabeth of York comforted him, though her own heart was breaking. Far away, Catherine of Aragon mourned in silence, only 16. Newly widowed. Alone in a foreign land, she had shared a short, awkward marriage. But Arthur had been kind to her, gentle. Now the halls of Ludlow felt like a tomb. Servants later said Catherine sat for hours staring out the window, whispering prayers in Spanish. She had lost her husband, her purpose, her future, and she did not yet know that this tragedy would bind her forever to another Tudor prince. After days of miserable travel, they reached Worcester Cathedral. The weather improved as they entered the city. Then came the burial. The Bishop of Lincoln wept as he sprinkled holy water on the chest. Arthur's officers cried openly, breaking their staffs and throwing them into the grave. One witness wrote he had a hard heart who did not weep. These people knew Arthur, served him, loved him. Now they buried their prince. Finally, the moment came. Sir William Uvedale, controller of Arthur's household, took his staff, raised it over his head, broke it in half, threw the pieces into the grave. After his prince, Sir Richard Croft, steward of Arthur's household, did the same with his staff. Courtiers broke their staffs and added them to the grave. Then the grave was filled with earth. Arthur Tudor, Prince of Wales, was gone. born the 19th of September 1486, died the 2nd of April 1502, married less than 5 months, dead at 15. But Arthur's story did not end there. Centuries later, scholars would make a shocking discovery beneath Worcester Cathedral, but that comes later. First, you must understand how his death changed the history of England. Arthur's death created waves that spread through the centuries. Remember Elizabeth's words to her husband? "We are still young enough to have children." She meant them. Weeks after Arthur's death, the 36-year-old queen became pregnant again. Too old for the dangers of childbirth, she knew the risk, but she took it. One last attempt to secure the Tudor line, one last hope for an heir, a desperate try to fill the void Arthur left. On the 11th of February, 1503 year, on her 37th birthday, Elizabeth began to give birth. She delivered a daughter. They named her Catherine after Arthur's widow, but something went wrong. Elizabeth of York died 9 days later. The infant followed her soon after. King Henry VII was destroyed. In less than a year, he lost his firstborn, his wife, his peace of mind. The cautious king became frightened and cold, obsessed with control, money, survival. Every decision he made after this came from one thing: terror of losing everything again. Henry VII had built everything on Arthur: the marriage to Spain, the promise of stability, the end of the Wars of the Roses. When Arthur died, the king who had been shrewd became paranoid. He hoarded gold, saw enemies in every corner, could not trust a world that stole his perfect heir. And 10-year-old Prince Henry watched it all unfold. One day you are the spare, free to joust, to play. The next day your brother is dead. Your mother dies. The survival of an entire kingdom rests on your shoulders. Henry VIII did not simply inherit the crown. He inherited a burden no child should carry. Years later, when Catherine of Aragon lost child after child, Henry saw more than dead infants. He saw Arthur. He saw his mother's death. He saw the fragility his father feared. Every loss whispered the same message: the Tudors are cursed. Without a male heir, their dynasty will not survive. Henry VIII's search for a male heir became an obsession. When the Pope refused a divorce, Henry shattered centuries of tradition. He broke with Rome, made himself head of the church, dissolved the monasteries, executed advisors who disagreed, including Thomas More. He married 6 times, executed 2 wives. Religious violence consumed England for generations. Catholics and Protestants tore the country apart, all because a 15-year-old boy died in 1502. So what killed Arthur Tudor? For 5 centuries, people debated it. Contemporary accounts described malignant vapors from the air, the sweating sickness, an illness that made victims feel as if their blood boiled. Modern historians suggest tuberculosis, pneumonia, flu, the English sweating sickness that killed thousands in periodic outbreaks. Some even propose testicular cancer, though that does not explain why Catherine fell ill too. The truth is, we will probably never know. Medieval medical knowledge was limited. Descriptions are vague. All we know for certain is that something struck Arthur in March 1502. 6 days later, he was dead. In 2002, exactly 500 years after Arthur's death, scientists brought ground-penetrating radar to Worcester Cathedral. They wanted to find Arthur's remains. Arthur's body is not buried in the beautiful stone tomb visitors see. That is just a memorial. His real body lies in a vault beneath the floor, slightly off from the monument. The radar showed a small space under the floor, a hidden chamber, and inside, a solid object shaped like a coffin. The vault is filled with earth and rubble. Remember, Arthur was buried in a wooden chest. After 5 centuries, that wood is long gone. His bones are scattered in the dirt beneath the cathedral floor. Scientists did not open the vault. That requires the Queen's permission. But they confirmed he is almost certainly still there. The boy who was meant to be king, resting in darkness. King Henry VII built Arthur's tomb in 1504. It is magnificent. A small chapel attached to the cathedral choir, graceful buttresses covered with carved figures in canopied niches, intricate stone tracery forms windows, rich parapet and pinnacles. Inside, the east end has elaborate carving with more saints. The figures are damaged now, likely vandalized during the Protestant Reformation under Edward VI, Arthur's nephew. But the tomb survived mostly intact. It is one of the most beautiful in England, a monument to hope that died too young. But imagine Arthur survived. Imagine that mysterious illness spared him, that Catherine recovered, and so did her husband. What would England look like? Arthur would have become king in 1509. Catherine would be his queen. They would have children. Sons, probably. Daughters. Arthur was described as gentle, educated, thoughtful, diplomatic. Would he have been a good king? A great one? We will never know. But here is what probably would not have happened. The break with Rome, the dissolution of the monasteries, the execution of Thomas More, the religious violence that tore England for a century. Henry VIII would have lived as a prince. Perhaps he would have become Archbishop of York as his father once planned. He would never marry 6 times, never execute 2 wives, never become one of history's most notorious tyrants. The Protestant Reformation in England might never have happened, at least not as it did. And America, founded in part by English Protestants fleeing religious persecution, it might be completely different too. The death of one boy, one mysterious illness, centuries of consequences, but Arthur died. And his absence shaped the next 500 years. There is a plaque in St. Lawrence's Church in Ludlow, marking where Arthur's heart may be buried. Tourists visit Worcester Cathedral and admire his beautiful tomb. Historians debate what killed him, but Arthur's death itself remains a mystery. The boy who was meant to change everything. The boy whose death changed everything instead. So if you could go back to 1502 and save Arthur's life, knowing it would erase Henry VIII, the English Reformation, and perhaps even change how America was founded, would you do it? Or are some tragedies necessary for history to unfold as it must?